Good afternoon, Frank.
Hello, Professor Sponer.
I think 2 weeks since we talked last.
It has been 2 weeks.
And, a lot has been happening, and I think the world is changing shape. And a number of the things are evidence of it changing shape in ways that I think we've probably predicted in previous weeks. The most amusing thing that I've seen today so far is President Putin offering refuge to Comey.
Yes, yes, he can have the condominium next door to Edward Snowden.
Yeah. But the more significant thing that I think Putin is doing or is a part of is that because of the continued, what should I say, the way that America continues to treat Iran, or has gone back to treating Iran after Obama tried to correct the situation, Putin is taking advantage of that and is developing a new relationship with Iran, which Iran needs and has to take advantage of.
It has no choice.
And at the same time, Putin, the American administration is supporting Saudi Arabia against Qatar, which is not exactly part of Iran's camp, but is, as always, operated in what should I say, not tried to separate itself from Iran. And so Iran is now offering to give Qatar everything that it's going to lose from Saudi Arabia. So that what America is doing is going to increase the divisions in the Middle East.
Well, that's true. And the unusual thing, of course, is that the Americans have 10,000 servicemen, military service people in Qatar. And then earlier today, just approved the sale of 36 fighter jets to them. And
I wonder whether people in Washington had forgotten about the troops.
The question was asked today at a hearing of the Assistant Secretary of State by a congressman, whether or not President Trump was aware of the fact that the United States sold today, planned to and executed it today apparently, 36 fighter jets to Qatar.
Yeah.
Given the light of his statements of last week, and the response was, well, we assume he did.
Well, it's very complicated.
I don't think it's that complicated at all. I don't think it is at all. I think, go ahead, excuse me.
Go ahead.
I think that the president was beguiled by the sword dance and the glowing orb and the hotel-sized photographs of himself in Riyadh. And I think that if you asked him point blank, he wouldn't even be able to tell you that there are Shia and Sunni Muslims. He would say they're just all Sunnis. I don't think he knows. And I think he's witlessly created a tremendous problem that Putin is exploiting.
He does actually hold what he calls cabinet meetings.
We know that he's held one. It looked like something that was held in Pyongyang.
And presumably the foreign secretary attends those meetings, and presumably the foreign secretary knows, one would hope that he knows, that
I'm sure Tillerson does, yes.
Saudi Arabia to bomb Yemen, and also giving these arms and to Qatar, and also having troops stationed there. So somebody in the cabinet level must know these things. But it makes one wonder what's going to happen next. My point is that in various parts of the world, it's becoming clearer that America is no longer in charge, and so and it's not clear what it's going to happen after the age of American hegemony. It took us some time to get used to American hegemony after the Victorian period, and now it's probably going to take. I think everything moves faster in the 21st century than it did before the end of the 20th century. But it's still going to take a little while before we work out what the new shape of the world is going to be. But presumably it's going to be more evenly balanced geographically.
I think so. Yeah, I would think so.
And that could be good if people are really willing to compromise, talk to each other, work together. It could be very bad if people like many of the people we have experience of, don't talk to each other and don't listen and don't work with each other. Simply because the amount of travel between different parts of the world is increasing, and the resistance to travel is also making things more difficult.
Well, what I also found interesting, I was in London last Thursday, the day of the election. And in the days leading up to it, I was talking to people during meetings, and there was a tremendous amount of resentment, even from Tory supporters against Theresa May's declarative hard Brexit. And there was a feeling, well, yeah, okay, we voted to leave, but I mean, we're not exactly sailing out to the west into the mid-Atlantic here, right? I mean, we need to stay a part of Europe, and
things are very difficult for her. And the BBC was starting a new series today on just trying to understand exactly what happened in the election, because even though we knew that things didn't look as good for the Tories in the beginning of June as they had looked at the time that she declared the election, nevertheless, nobody expected the results that actually happen. And it's interesting that everything that's happened electorally in the last 6 months or more, over the last year for that matter, has turned out differently from what was expected, even differently from what the pollsters told us to expect.
Well, I have a theory about this. I mean, you've been alive longer than I've been alive. So you've seen some more cataclysmic kinds of events in the whole population history wave. The biggest kind of event I can remember is what happened in 1968 and 1969 in the United States and the West in general, when a younger generation began to wrest power away slowly, but eventually, successfully, from the quote-unquote establishment. I mean, it was just simply time for another group to stand in and the other group to step out. And I think if you look back over history, it's not all that unusual. It happens. And I think what happened in Britain is that just about every young person under the age of 25 who had not voted in the election last June crawled out from the woodwork and made sure that their voices were heard. And that's the sense that I got from reading the newspapers over there in the lead up and the postmortems the next day, and from what I saw on TV. And I think in the United States, I think it's going to have the same effect. I think we're going to see that next November in the elections, and I think we're going to see it in November of 2020. And it sometimes takes an event like the Vietnam War, like the Kent State shootings, like the riots in Detroit and Newark and Watts, like
disruption.
It has to happen to wake that next group that's on the chronological conveyor belt coming along and jolt them out of the complacency of, hey, we're no longer young people, we're not in the dorms anymore, we're not in school, we have to begin to take our places in society. And if we don't vote, if we don't make our voices heard, they won't be heard.
No, it's true, and what causes change more than anything else is some sort of disruption, that disruption to the status quo, which allows new forces to develop. it's strange that Theresa May seemed very good until she declared the election, and then she ran an awful campaign. Corbyn seemed very bad until she declared the election, and he ran an excellent campaign. And now there's this strange situation in which the Labour has got 30 more seats, but most of the new members don't want to be led by Corbyn. And Theresa May still has, with the help of the UDP, a sort of majority, but doesn't have the confidence of a lot of her MPs either. So it's not clear what's going to happen. And on the other hand, in France, again, the unexpected happened in the election, and yet it was all much more positive. In fact, France now looks excellent.
Mm-hmm.
And one wonders what's going to happen in Germany in October.
Well, I think the reason for the French phenomenon, and I suspect it's going to be carried on in Germany as well, is the kind of communication links that exist globally now allowed French voters to look at what happened in Britain, to look at what happened in the United States, and then to look at Le Pen and go, my goodness, we don't want this. We don't want to go in that direction. And I think that we heard the second echo of that in the parliamentary elections last weekend. And I think we're going to see the same thing in Germany. I think people have become fully invested now. Everybody's paying attention. There's nobody not paying attention any longer. Whereas a year ago, you could find people who were blissfully skipping along saying, I'm not interested in politics, I don't care. Nobody doesn't care any longer.
However, I agree with what you're saying, but I think that even though they're paying attention, they're not paying equal attention to everything. And they're mainly seeing things in terms of what they understand as their own interests. And it's difficult to tell what the people who were not so interested in politics before will see as their own interests in Germany in October. Because we don't know what will have happened to the Brexit talks by then. Mm-hmm. Theresa May is now in a very difficult position because she really wouldn't have become Prime Minister at all if it hadn't been for the Brexit referendum.
Correct.
And the Brexit referendum didn't say hard Brexit or soft Brexit, but it implied total Brexit. And it's only much more recently that people have started talking about, well, maybe there's a harder or a softer way of doing it. And of course, it's not clear yet whether there are really harder and softer possibilities, because it's not clear what the other 27 are going to allow.
Well, I agree, and that's why I was particularly intrigued by Macron's comments at the Elysee Palace the other day when he threw her a lifeline. Now, Macron has his finger on the pulse of something, certainly in France, and maybe elsewhere as well, when he said to her very declaratively a couple of times, the door is always open to come back. You can change positions. And I mean, that was a signal not sent to her. I mean, I think she's fairly hopeless at this point. That signal was meant for the British electorate. And I found that fascinating that he said that several times.
The question, I think, the big question for many people in England now is how to put together a mandate for Theresa May with the voting interests of the majority of the British public. And nobody wants another election.
Yeah, I think the British are pretty exhausted by elections right now, but I do think, and we've said this before, I don't know what your thinking is on this, but if they had another Brexit election now, I think it would be wholeheartedly to remain.
That's really ironic, but I think it's very likely that you're correct in that.
So I mean that's again, that goes back. This is like a continuous loop. That goes back to something that we always discuss. about the inability of these democratic governmental institutions to be able to respond to the will of the people quickly enough. So now what's going on? Go ahead.
The process of globalization is such that there are stops and starts. And because the relationship between the people who want change, think they see what's coming and like it, and the people that are in resistance to losing what they had before, that they're afraid they're going to not be able to maintain, the balance between these two forces keeps changing.
Mm-hmm. What do you think? What do you think of what's going on with? I mean, I have to ask you this question. I mean, although I know it's just so topical, you'll sneer at it because it's so headline oriented. But what do you really think is going on with Trump, the Russians, and the investigations of him by Robert Mueller?
I think that there's an enormous amount of room for suspicion, but I don't see any evidence, real evidence, that anything significant is actually happening. Although they've begun to talk today in some of the media about Trump being in real difficulty with regard to the possibility of being accused of obstruction of justice, I'm not sure that anything has really changed. It's just getting more and more complicated with more and more people involved in ways that have to be brought into the discussion. But until there are some people in Congress who stand up and say something, I don't see what can happen.
They may not be there until January of 2019. So, regrettably.
Well, it's going to be interesting to see what happens in the next week anyway.
Yes, my goodness, at this rate, I can't even imagine. All right, well, Professor Spooner, thank you very much for your time, and we'll look forward to speaking next week.
Good.
All right, bye.
Bye.